All right, this is gonna be my tier list for the MLB teams this year. The tiers are how good they are performing based on what the fans' expectations were before the season started. So at the top we have greatly exceeded expectations, then just like exceeded expectations in a good way, not like greatly though. Then we just have properly rated met expectations. This doesn't mean that you're bad. It just means that you know we thought you were going to be bad and you are bad, or we thought you were going to be good and you are good. You are as good as we thought you were going to be. Underwhelming, that's bad. You don't want to be underwhelming. And then what the fuck? That's really bad. So here we go. So to start with, we're going to do the Texas Rangers. So the Rangers, they were really bad last year. They've been bad for a few years. Um, but in the offseason, they made two very big signings, actually, really three. They signed Marcus Simeon, Corey Seager, and John Gray, all three of whom have been very, very underwhelming in their own right. Um, Corey Seager is usually like a 300 hitter who's got some pretty good pop. And this year he looks to be more of like more home runs, more power swings, not as much a batting average. But he's still been pretty good. His defense is quite questionable, I must say, but he's still a good player. Marcus Simeon was extremely, extremely underwhelming. Like worst second baseman in baseball after being the best one last year. He was awful for the first month and a half, and then he's actually been pretty good lately. Surprising, he's actually got double-digit home runs, which I didn't know he did. So that's crazy. And then John Gray has been pretty bad. He really wasn't that great in Colorado, but he was expected to kind of do a little better once you got him out of that stadium and got him into the cavernous Ranger Stadium, but he still hasn't really been that great. So the reason I'm going to put the Rangers at just slightly underwhelming is because they actually have been playing pretty good baseball. Despite their three big signings not really living up to it, they haven't been awful. At one point, they were second in the division, but I'm pretty sure they're still under 500, and their future looks pretty good, but it doesn't look like they're going to be good this year. So slightly underwhelming just because, their signings just weren't that great. The Toronto Blue Jays, I'm going to have to put them in the what the fuck. The WTF is going to get their first team. And the reason for this, the Blue Jays are not a bad team. They just fired their manager, which was an awful move in my opinion, but they really shouldn't have done that. The Blue Jays, they're not a bad team. They have so many pieces, but they made some awful signings in this past offseason. You really thought that all they needed was some starting pitching. They won. They almost made the postseason. They were one win away last year, and they were still kind of in that rebuild mode last year. But Vlad had a season. Bo Bichette had a great season. Alec Manoah kind of broke out. But the problem is people forget what they lost. They lost Marcus Simeon, and they lost Robbie Ray. You lose a Cy Young winner, and actually Marcus Simeon was worth more wins above replacement per Baseball Reference than Vlad. So I mean, you really forget what they lose. They people forget. People think that by adding Kevin Gausman and Yusei Kikuchi that was gonna put them over that like 91 win threshold. It doesn't. I don't really think they're gonna hit that this year. They're just been extremely underwhelming. I think people need to understand that they did not meet their expectations just because they lost more than they got back. Kevin Gausman is a good pitcher, but he's not going to win the Cy Young, and so he's not going to really be a great fill-in for Robbie Ray. And Yusei Kikuchi has always been so overrated. He's not a good pitcher, and so yeah. The next team is the Detroit Tigers. We're going to have to put them in the WTF section as well. This was a team that, I mean, it looked like they were on the come up last year. You had Akil Badu going off. You had, like a really good farm system. People were saying like Spencer Torkelson was going to be the next Mike Trout because he was just so advanced, such an advanced hitter, but he's not done that great. This is a really, really bad team. There's no one on this team with 10-plus home runs. And it sucks because the moves they made last year and this past offseason were supposed to be, very, very good. They traded for Austin Meadows, traded for Tucker Barnhart, signed Javier Baez. All those players are doing pretty bad. Tucker Barnhart has no home runs in about 57 games, I think. Javier Baez has been an awful signing. They really should have just upped the ante and gone for Correa instead. Spencer Torkelson really hasn't been that good. I'm not gonna say he's a bust, but he's been really bad this year. So yeah, these you just and also the Austin Meadows, you just don't trade with the Rays. They know when to offload their talent. They know like when their players are going to be bad, and they trade them, and then they turn the players you give them into like super prospects. So just don't trade with the Rays. You should not trade for Austin Meadows. Oakland Athletics met expectations. Now them being above the Blue Jays, doesn't mean that they're a better team. The A's are awful, but we knew they were going to be awful. They traded away pretty much everyone who was worth like anything on their team. It looked like at the start of the season, the A's might have actually been in this exceeded expectations area. They started out kind of at 500, but they're down. Looks like they're going to be the worst team in baseball. They're just pretty bad this year. I feel bad for A's fans, but looks like they make some improvements on getting that new stadium. So maybe the Twins. The Twins, in my opinion, they are. I can't decide if they're meeting or exceeding. They're in one of these two. They're not. I would say they met expectations because they were really bad last year. But last year they were really more of an underwhelming team. They had some decent talent, and in this past offseason they made a lot of moves. You signed Carlos Correa. You trade for Gio Urshela and Gary Sanchez, and you trade for Sonny Gray. They're not if they're winning basically the worst division in baseball. They're kind of made like the minimum amount of moves that they need to just win the division this year. They're not going to be a great team. I don't think they're going to go deep in the playoffs, but they'll probably win their division. So that's all it is. The Brewers are meeting expectations, but they're kind of I feel like they should be in between. They kind of slightly underwhelming. The problem is the Brewers. They're finding ways to win each game, but I don't know how far that can take them. Christian Yelich is still looking like he's pretty washed. Corbin Burns is still a beast. He looks like he might try to go for a back-to-back Cy Young. He's really got to push it in that second half to get there. But Brandon Woodruff and Freddie Peralta have been bad. They have not been that good this year. The Brewers' big three, it's over. But the good thing about the Brewers is that they're basically a pitching factory, and they'll just throw more pitchers out at you from their minor leagues. So they're not going to really run out of talent. Should have made more moves in the offseason. I think that they traded for Alex Verdugo, which is good. I mean, not Alex Verdugo, sorry, Hunter Renfroe. And they traded Jackie Bradley Jr. That's a great trade because Hunter Renfroe is a good defender, and so is JBJ, but JBJ can't hit, and Hunter Renfroe kind of can. So, yeah. The White Sox, underwhelming. The White Sox were pretty much everyone's pick, and I think to win the division, the Central, but they're not. They look like they're not going to win. They can't seem to get it together. I mean, Tony La Russa, it needs to be fired. I mean, he is just such a cancer. It's not even like about his managerial decisions anymore, which are bad. It just seems like he's a clubhouse cancer. I don't think that his players have any faith in him, and I think that they want him gone, and that's just not great chemistry for your clubhouse. They're just not finding ways to win games that they should be winning. On paper they look like the best team in the division still. I mean, you got Lance Lynn back. Lucas Giolito's been kind of underwhelming, but he's still Lucas Giolito. Dylan Cease looks like a Cy Young candidate, massive all-star snub. I don't know how he's not in the all-star game. But yeah, they're just not finding ways to win games that they should be winning. I still think that they could make a playoff push. I think that the division, maybe they could win it if the push is that big, but I still think they could sneak into a wild card. They need to figure it out soon though, because their farm system is pretty bad. It's pretty drained, so they should be in win now mode. They didn't do enough in this past offseason to ensure that. So yeah. The Marlins, they're an average team, and I think that's what pretty much everyone expected them to be. So I'm just gonna leave them at Medic's expectations. They've got some talent, but it's not a complete team. You've got Sandy Alcantara, you've got Jazz Chisholm, who's a good second baseman. He's basically a way above average second baseman. If you put him at any other position, he'd probably just be an average player. but the fact that he plays second base pretty much it makes him pretty valuable because it's an extremely weak position, in my opinion. So, the Marlins have some talent, but they really need to do a better job of building around it because there are just so many holes on that team. The Reds. See, I would want to say the Reds are like in the A's case with met expectations, but I'm gonna put them at a little underwhelming because they just got off to such a horrific start. We know that they traded away Jesse Winker and Eugenio Suarez, and we know that Luis Castillo, maybe Tyler Mahle are on the trade block, but the Reds they were just really bad to start the season. They were worse than people thought they were going to be. You still had the Rookie of the Year winner from 2021 and Jonathan India, and you still had you signed Tommy Pham, even though he's just there to pad his stats. I mean, that's motivation for both sides to do good. So I think the Reds were a little underwhelming. They did just win a series against the Yankees. So yeah, but I did not expect the Reds to be as bad as they were to start the season. Like, they started out 3-23. I mean, that's just awful. The Orioles, boom, easy, exceeding expectations. Now, I would put them in the greatly exceeded expectations, but I was kind of one to think that the Orioles were kind of on the come up anyway. I mean, you could tell they have some pieces there, like Trey Mancini, Cedric Mullins, and a couple starting pitchers, but they also had that loaded farm system. They finally called up Adley Rutschman. So, I mean, I think that they exceeded everyone's expectations. I'm not going to put them in the greatly exceeded because they are sitting at 45 and 44, which isn't something crazy. I think that they're a team to watch out for in the future. But yeah, they're on a 10 or 11 game win streak right now. It's amazing. I'm very happy for the Baltimore fan base. The Dodgers met expectations. You knew that they were going to be a great team. I think they're 58-30 right now. I mean, that's pretty much what you expected them to be. I don't think that they're underwhelming or exceeding anyone's expectations. I think that they're exactly what you thought they were going to be. They're the powerhouse in the National League. They're going to run away with that division. So yeah, the Guardians. I'm going to put them at exceeded expectations because last year they were pretty bad. They didn't really look like they had much substance. But this year it looks like Josh Naylor looks like a future first baseman there. They've got Stephen Kwan was good at the start, but it looks like he's just going to be this year's Yermin Mercedes. Jose Ramirez is doing Jose Ramirez things. The Shane Bieber is back, and it looked like they might actually contend for the division at one point with the Twins. I don't know if that's going to last the whole season. However, I think the Guardians are going to make a good push for the wild card, and that's something I did not expect them to do at the start of the year. So yeah, the Rays, this is hard. I'm gonna put them at met expectations. I would want to put them at exceeded expectations because their players are getting so much, or like all their players are hurt. They're basically running a AA squad, and they're still finding ways to win a lot of games. However, that doesn't really factor into the whole like preseason expectations. So I'm gonna put them at met expectations because they're winning a lot of games with what they have, basically what the Rays do, and that's what you thought they were gonna do. So yeah, the Mariners. Put them at underwhelming. I know that right now they're on a 10-game win streak, but this was a lot of people's preseason favorites to win the division, and I don't know. They signed Robbie Ray, traded for Adam Frazier, Eugenio Suarez, and Jesse Winker, so basically overhauling all the bats. You used to call up Julio Rodriguez, super prospect, and now you got J.P. Crawford, and you thought you were gonna have Jared Kelenic, but he looks like a bust. The Mariners, they were finding not a lot of ways to win games at the start of the season, and they kind of dug themselves into a hole. It looks like they're digging themselves out of it, but they're still 11 or 12 games back in the division. I don't think that they're going to be able to make a push for the division. They're going to have a wild card, most likely, but I think what people forget is last year they had 90 wins, which was like 2 wins away from being in the playoffs. But they had a negative run differential. You can't, people overrated last year and over last year's Mariners. Had a negative run differential. Their Pythagorean win-loss had them winning like 79 games. You know, I don't think that people should have been picking them to win the division this year, and I think the fact that so many people were, and they're definitely not going to be doing that, it puts them underwhelming. The Nationals met expectations. They're bad. You knew they were going to be bad, and they're bad. I think that if we look at some players from the Nationals, you have Josh Bell, who I think is exceeding expectations. And I think you have Nelson Cruz, who is pretty underwhelming, as well as Juan Soto is slightly underwhelming. I mean, you would look at Juan Soto as more of like a high contact hitter with some pop. Looks like the contact's not there. He's still walking a lot. He's still an amazing, very valuable player. He's going to get a bag. So it doesn't really matter. The Nationals properly rated. My expectations. All right, the Pirates. At the start of the season, I would have put them at exceeded because they were winning, pretty decent amount of games. I put them at my expectations for the same reason I put the Nationals there. They're bad, and you knew they were going to be bad, and they're exactly what you thought they were. I think that they have a good farm system, and O'Neal Cruz is looking like a pretty good shortstop so far. But this team's not going anywhere anytime soon. So yeah, the Diamondbacks are going to be an underwhelming. And the reason I'm going to put them in underwhelming is because the Diamondbacks before this year started looked like they had some pieces to work with. You got Merrill Kelly, you got Mad Bum, you've got Ketel Marte, who they extended. They've got some pieces, but they're not going to be contending for the division this year. They're not going to be contending for a playoff spot. Diamondbacks just another wasted year. They're just not a good team. They did do something good in this offseason by employing Brent Strom, the Houston pitching coach, but it's just not looking like it's coming together for them this year, so I'm just going to leave them at underwhelming. The Royals are meeting our expectations. They, for the same reason that these two teams, they're just not a good team, and I don't think anyone thought they were going to be in the playoffs this year, so yeah. All right, the Braves. I'm gonna put the Braves at. Oh man, if this was a couple weeks ago, I would have put them at underwhelming. I'm gonna put them at my expectations though, because they've been really good lately. At the start, they were very underwhelming. I think everyone picked the Braves to win that division. They won the World Series last year, and then they went out and they got Matt Olson. You lose Freddie Freeman and you get Matt Olson, so you lose some contact there, but you get some more pop. So it's kind of a one. I'd say it's a 1-for-1, but you re-sign Eddie Rosario. Yeah, you get Acuna back, you get Ozuna back. You think you might get Soroka back at some point. The Braves, they didn't really lose much in free agency. They get Kenley Jansen to upgrade the bullpen. And at the start, they were just not really showing it that much. They were losing a lot of games. But the Braves have a loaded farm system. They called up Michael Harris. They called up William Contreras, and those guys are basically making them the Braves that we thought they were going to be at the start of the year. Also very greatly exceeding expectations season from Dansby Swanson so far. It's pretty impressive. The Cubs, underwhelming. The Cubs last year they sold. They at the deadline they traded away Rizzo, Baez, and Bryant. Everybody knows about that. But you still have Ian Happ, you still have Kyle Hendricks, you still have some pieces to work with, and it looked like some of the guys that they called up after they traded those guys away were doing pretty good. Like you got Patrick Wisdom showing that he might actually be major league ready, and then they went out in the offseason. They got Marcus Stroman and they got Seiya Suzuki, two pretty hyped up free agents, and neither of those guys have done that good. The Cubs, they're not really like the Nationals and the Pirates and the Royals, where like we knew they were gonna be like not that good, but they're worse than I thought they would be. So I'm gonna put it on underwhelming. The Yankees are going to be the first team that greatly exceeded expectations. Now I'm an Astros fan, so this hurts, but the Yankees exceeded expectations, and I don't think anyone can deny that. I think a lot of people were saying, they were going to finish fourth in their division. Everyone pretty much figured the Rays were better. The the Red Sox beat them in the postseason last year, so the Red Sox were going to be close with them, and everyone was picking the Blue Jays to be to win that division. At least I was. I think a lot of people were. A lot of people were picking the Blue Jays to win the pennant, um, especially because the Yankees, how underwhelming their season was last year, and in this offseason they didn't really, go out and get any big free agents. All they really did was trade for, Josh Donaldson for Gio Urshela. That wasn't really very big, and they traded for Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, just to kind of upgrade the defense a little bit there at shortstop, which hasn't really worked so far. But yeah, they have the best record by far, greatly exceeding expectations. They're so locked down. They're finding ways to win every single game. When they're trailing, when they're leading, they don't give it up. Their bullpen is great. Their starting pitching is great, has been great at least. And their offense just will not rest. So yeah, Yankees greatly exceeding expectations. I don't think anyone can deny that. The Padres are underwhelming. I mean, look, you built up yourself a super team in 2021, and it was pretty underwhelming last year, and you're doing the same thing this year. I mean, last year you had you Darvish, Blake Snell. You trade for those guys. You get Tatis, you get Machado, and you finish under 500, and it's just so underwhelming. I mean, Mackenzie Gore was looking pretty good at the start, but he's been faltering lately. You have Joe Musgrove, so that's really good, but you're not gonna be contending for this division. It looked like they were at some point, but then they got basically swept by the Dodgers, and I don't know. I just think the Dodgers are gonna run away with that division. The Padres are not gonna win that division, so yeah, that's why I'm putting them at underwhelming. The Cardinals, man, I'm gonna put them at slightly exceeding expectations. I think that some of their players are playing out of their minds, like Paul Goldschmidt. Nolan Arenado is having a way better offensive year so far than last year. You know what you're getting with the Cardinals. It's kind of like a cheap. They don't spend a ton of money in the offseason. They didn't really do anything in the offseason last year, except I think they signed Steven Matz. That's the only move I can think of that they made. They like to work with the pieces that they call up, and they called up Nolan Gorman and another prospect, and they're playing pretty well. The Cardinals look like they're going to contend with the Brewers for the division. I think they can make a push to win the division. I think it's going to be close, but they're going to need to, because it's going to be hard to contend for a wild card in the National League this year. So I think they're exceeding expectations, but I think that they need to do a little more. The Astros, I want to put them at met expectations, because I think everyone knew that they were going to be good, and that they were. I think that a lot of sane people, like people who had their minds in the right spot, would pick them to win that division. But because so many people were putting the Mariners and the Angels to win the AL West, I'm gonna have to put the Astros at exceeded expectations, because you lose. This happens. This seems to be happening every year. The Astros, they lose, one player, and this year it was Correa, and suddenly the Mariners, the Angels, they're gonna contend for the division. The Astros are gonna, they're not gonna win that division anymore, and you lose Correa. I'm not saying Jeremy Pena is as good as Correa, but he's a great replacement. I don't know why people thought that they were not going to win the division. A big reason they're going to be exceeding expectations, though, is their pitching has taken a big leap forward. I mean, you got back Verlander, which is pretty much the only move they made in the offseason. They upgraded their bullpen a little bit, and Framber Valdez is having a big breakout, which he did last year, but an even bigger breakout this year. Christian Javier looks like he might be breaking out, so yeah, their pitching has taken a big step forward, and that's why they have the second best record in baseball. The Phillies, underwhelming. I mean, they were pretty average last year, but in the offseason they added what was it? They added Kyle Schwarber and Nick Castellanos, which was it. Probably not the smartest move when you already have a pretty bad, weak defense, and you add two guys who are bad defenders. But you didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal, because you were hoping Aaron Nola would would resurge, and you had a Cy Young snub last year in Zach Wheeler, but it's not working out for the Phillies. And they're slightly underwhelming. I think they've been good since they fired Joe Girardi. I think that must have been a good move, but yeah, I just think that they're not meeting the expectations that people thought they had before the season started. The Giants, pretty underwhelming, I must say. The Giants, they won the most games in baseball last year. They lose Kevin Gausman and Buster Posey, but I guess that was enough for them to just completely kind of fall into the mediocre range of teams. You knew there'd be a drop off there. They signed Carlos Rodon, but I mean, I didn't expect them to drop off this much. I love the Giants, but I'm gonna have to keep them underwhelming. They don't look like they're gonna really go for a wild card spot this year. Maybe they can sneak into the third one, but I don't think they're definitely not going for the division. So yeah, the Mets greatly exceeding expectations. Now I know that the Mets had a big off season, with Max Scherzer and pairing him with DeGrom. I predicted that one or both of those guys would get hurt before the season started, and they both got hurt. DeGrom is going to be out longer. He hasn't made a start yet this year, and Scherzer's been good while he's played. But yeah, the Mets, basically what they did was overhaul their whole lineup, kind of with signing, Canna, Marte, and Escobar, and basically kind of just bringing in a bunch of new faces, trying to change up the team culture because it was a losing culture and it needed to be changed. And I think a really big move they did was hire Buck Showalter to be their manager. He's amazing, especially with the team culture aspect. I think that's a big difference because the guys that they signed, the bats that they signed, Canna, Escobar, and Marte, those guys are not really like big game changing. They're not bad. They're probably B level. They're not these A level like Bryce Harper, Machado, not like that. They're B level, but you came in and you just changed the losing culture. Brandon Nimmo's having a great year. They also got Chris Bassett. It's great what they're doing, and they're gonna probably be better in the future because their owner seems to not care about going over any luxury tax. So yeah, they're setting themselves up for a dynasty. So we'll see. The Red Sox, oh man, I would have put them at underwhelming a couple of weeks ago, but I'm gonna put them at met expectations. They have a good record. They're pretty well above 500. Their pitching is not good, but it's exactly what we thought it was going to be. They don't really have much starting pitching, but their offense is kind of carrying. Bogarts, Trevor Story, JD Martinez, and especially Rafael Devers. And those guys are just going crazy. Garrett Whitlock's back in the closing role. I like that. They should not try to convert him into a starter. So yeah, Angels, where they're going. The Angels have kind of become a meme lately, so I'm not really gonna take too many jabs at them because I'm sure everyone else has already done it enough. But they're just Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani, and look at their record. You know what I mean? Those are the number one and two guys in baseball, and look what they've done with it. So I don't need to say much more. So yeah, Angels are gonna angel. The Rockies, I'm gonna put them at met expectations. I think that they're not a great team, but that's just what we thought they were going to be. I think that this year they are playing interesting, fun little baseball. I think that they're kind of a fun team to watch this year, but they're not going to be doing anything. So I don't think that the Dodgers or Padres or anyone in that division really needs to worry about the Rockies. So yeah, this is the list. These are the underwhelming, overwhelming teams this year. So yeah.